The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the quiet suburban street. A soft breeze rustled through the trees, and birds chirped in the distance. It was a typical afternoon in the peaceful neighborhood where Michael Jordan, a retired K-9 officer, lived with his loyal companion, Ace, a Belgian Malinois. Michael had spent years working in the police force, fighting crime with Ace by his side, but now he was just trying to live a quiet life, away from the chaos of his past. The sound of Ace's paws clicking against the sidewalk echoed in the otherwise peaceful street as Michael walked with his dog, enjoying the rare moment of calm. Ace, though still the strong and intelligent dog he had been in his prime, was now content just walking beside his owner. He was no longer chasing criminals or tracking down suspects, but the bond between them was as strong as ever. Michael glanced down at Ace, who was walking beside him, nose in the air, sensing something in the breeze. "Still got that keen nose, huh, boy?" Michael chuckled softly, his voice warm but tinged with the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much. Ace glanced up at him, his ears twitching, and gave a low woof, as if agreeing. "Yeah, I know, I'm not used to the quiet either," Michael said, sighing. He missed the rush of his old job, the adrenaline, the sense of purpose. But after years of service, it was time to leave it behind. The only thing that remained constant in his life now was Ace, his steadfast companion. As they approached the park, the scent of fresh grass and the sound of children's laughter filled the air. Michael could see a group of kids playing on the swings, and his eyes softened. "It's nice to see them having fun," he murmured. Ace perked up at the sound of laughter, but then his ears stiffened. His gaze shifted towards a little girl riding a bicycle nearby. Michael followed his dog's gaze and saw an 8-year-old girl, Emily Adams, pedaling furiously around the park. She was wearing a bright pink helmet and a pair of knee pads, her pigtails flying as she zoomed past. "Careful, Emily," Michael called out, but his voice was lost in the wind. Emily, lost in her own world, didn't hear him. She was going too fast, weaving through the park, her giggles echoing in the air. Michael couldn't help but smile. She was full of life, the kind of child who could brighten anyone's day. But then, just as Michael's gaze shifted back to Ace, a loud screech broke through the air. Emily's bike hit a small bump, and the front tire jerked violently. She lost control and was heading straight for the road. "No!" Michael shouted, his heart stopping. He ran toward her, his legs pumping as fast as they could. But it was too far. He wouldn't make it in time. Ace, however, had no hesitation. The dog's instincts kicked in immediately. Without a second thought, he broke free from Michael's side and bolted towards Emily, faster than Michael had ever seen him move. Ace's powerful legs carried him across the park, his eyes locked on the young girl as she careened toward the busy street. "Emily!" Michael screamed, but Ace was already there, leaping at the girl just in time. He tackled her out of the way, knocking her to the grass as a car screeched to a halt, barely missing them both. Michael skidded to a stop just as he reached them, panting and out of breath. He dropped to his knees beside Emily, who was now crying, shaking in fear, but unharmed. "Are you okay?" Michael asked urgently, pulling her into his arms to check for injuries. Emily nodded, her small body trembling. I'm okay, but the dog." She looked at Ace, who was now sitting beside her, his fur slightly ruffled but his eyes calm and alert. Michael turned to look at Ace, his heart swelling with gratitude and disbelief. The dog had acted without hesitation, without any command. He had saved the little girl's life. "Good boy," Michael murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out to pat Ace on the head, but the dog remained focused on Emily, as if ensuring she was okay. Thank you so much." Emily's mother, Sarah Adams, rushed over to them, her face pale with fear. She had witnessed the whole thing from a distance and had come running as soon as she saw the car stop. Michael stood up, gently lifting Emily into his arms to check her over once more. "She's fine," he assured Sarah. "A little shaken, but nothing serious. She's one lucky girl." Sarah wiped away the tears that had welled up in her eyes. I don't know what to say. I was so scared. If it wasn't for Ace. Her voice cracked as she looked at the dog, still sitting beside Emily, never leaving her side. Emily reached out and hugged Ace tightly, burying her face in his fur. You saved my life, she whispered. You're my hero. Michael smiled softly, his eyes glistening with a mix of pride and relief. I think Ace would like that, he said. He's a hero, all right. Sarah knelt down beside her daughter, wrapping her arms around both of them. Thank you, Ace. Thank you so much, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. For a long moment no one spoke. The sound of the breeze, the distant chatter of the park, and the soft rustle of leaves were the only things breaking the silence. Michael stood by, watching as Emily and Ace shared a quiet moment. The bond between them was immediate, unspoken, and deep. Ace, the dog who had once been a fierce police dog, was now an unlikely protector, a guardian angel for the little girl who had narrowly escaped disaster. As they all stood there in the fading light, Michael felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. He had always known that Ace was more than just a working dog. But today he had witnessed something truly remarkable. Ace had saved a life, and in doing so had shown the world the true meaning of loyalty and courage. Come on, let's get you home, Michael said softly to Emily, gently lifting her up. Your mom's going to want to make sure you're okay. Emily clung to Ace's fur, her eyes still wide with awe. Can he come with us? I don't want to leave him. He's my hero. Michael smiled, glancing at Sarah, who gave a gentle nod. Of course, Michael said. Ace stays with us. As the trio made their way home, Michael couldn't help but feel a tug at his heart. This was just the beginning. Ace had done something incredible today, but Michael knew that this bond between the dog and the little girl would grow into something even more extraordinary, and it would change both of their lives forever. The next few days were a whirlwind for Emily and her family. What had started as an ordinary afternoon in the park had turned into a life-changing event. As word of Ace's heroic act spread through the neighborhood, the small town had become a buzz of excitement, with neighbors and friends stopping by to offer their gratitude and admiration for the dog that had saved a little girl's life. But amidst the excitement, there was a quiet shift in the atmosphere. Michael could sense the weight of the moment settling on Emily's family. They were still shaken by the close call, and while the community's gratitude was overwhelming, the thought of how narrowly they had lost Emily kept lingering in their minds. The bond between Emily and Ace grew stronger each day, with Emily insisting that Ace join her for everything from school runs to playtime in the backyard. He was no longer just a police dog, he was family. One evening, as Michael sat on the porch of his house, sipping a glass of water and watching the sun dip behind the trees, Sarah Adams came over. She had become a regular visitor, bringing Emily by often to visit Ace and thank him again, though Michael had assured her countless times that there was no need for thanks. Hey, Michael, Sarah called as she approached, her tone warmer than the first time they'd met. Hey, Sarah, Michael replied, standing up and offering a smile. How's Emily doing? She's doing great. She can't stop talking about Ace. She even made him a thank you card this morning, Sarah said, her voice full of affection. Michael chuckled. I'm sure Ace will appreciate that. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, watching as Ace lay on the lawn, his eyes scanning the surroundings. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short time. The quiet, introspective man had gone from hiding from the world to being part of something bigger. You know, Sarah began after a moment, her voice softer now. I don't think I've properly thanked you for everything, Michael. You saved my daughter's life. Michael shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. It wasn't me. It was Ace. He's the one who deserves the thanks. But Sarah shook her head, her gaze fixed on the dog. You've both saved us in more ways than one. You're right, Ace is the hero here, but it was you who gave him the chance to act. You've given us a piece of hope. I don't think we can ever repay you for that. Michael paused, looking over at Ace, who had perked up at the sound of his name. I just did what anyone would have done. I couldn't let anything happen to her. You're a good man, Michael, Sarah said, placing a hand on his arm gently. You don't hear that enough, do you? Michael didn't respond at first. He glanced down at his feet, then back to Sarah. It's not about being good, Sarah. It's about doing what's right. And Ace. He glanced at the dog again, who was now wagging his tail. He's just been doing what he's always done. He's always been a protector. Sarah smiled, but there was something wistful in her expression. He's more than a protector, Michael. He's a miracle. A light breeze rustled through the trees, and the distant laughter of children playing in the park carried on the wind. The silence between them was comfortable, but Michael could feel a subtle shift in their conversation. It was as if both of them were beginning to understand that Ace was more than just a dog. He was a symbol of resilience, of hope, and of second chances. So, how are you doing? Sarah asked gently, breaking the silence. Michael glanced at her, his expression a little guarded.
I'm adjusting.
It's strange, you know? Not being in the field anymore. I don't know if I'll ever fully get used to it. I can imagine, Sarah replied thoughtfully. But you're still doing something important. You're giving Ace a life after service. And you're giving Emily a reminder that miracles happen every day. Michael smiled softly. I guess I am. Just then, Emily came running out of the house, her face bright with excitement. She had a colorful card in her hand and handed it to Michael with a huge grin. Here, Michael. This is for Ace, she said, holding up the card proudly. I made it all by myself. It's for the bravest dog in the world. Michael took the card from her, and his heart warmed at the sight of the scribbled words and childish drawings. The card read, To Ace, the hero, thank you for saving my life. Love, Emily. Thank you, Emily, Michael said, his voice full of gratitude as he kneeled to her level and handed the card over to Ace, who sniffed it curiously. Ace is going to love this. Emily beamed and hugged Ace tightly. I'll never forget you, Ace. For a brief moment, everything felt right. Michael watched as the little girl hugged the dog, her arms wrapped around his neck. Ace stood still, content in the knowledge that he had protected someone he loved. But there was a deeper connection forming, one that was hard to put into words. Is it all right if Ace stays with us for a little longer? Emily asked, looking up at Michael with wide, hopeful eyes. I promise I'll take care of him. He's my hero. Michael looked at Sarah, who nodded. I think that's a great idea, Emily. It's time for him to be a kid again. He deserves to have some fun. Michael chuckled softly, his heart lifting. All right then. I guess Ace is staying for a while. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the three of them, Michael, Sarah, and Emily, sat together in the yard, watching Ace as he frolicked happily in the grass. It was a peaceful scene, but one that marked the beginning of something deeper. They all knew that Ace had saved Emily's life, but none of them realized how much this dog would go on to change all of their lives in ways they could never have expected. The bond between them was now unbreakable. And though they couldn't yet understand all that Ace had been through in his past, it didn't matter. He was home, and that was all that mattered now. The days that followed were filled with laughter, love, and the shared moments between Emily, her family, and Ace. The little girl had become inseparable from the dog. He went everywhere with her, from the park to her school and even the grocery store. It was as though the bond they shared was fated to be. Emily loved Ace with all her heart, and Ace seemed to know it, offering her companionship, comfort, and a sense of safety that only a true hero could provide. Michael, on the other hand, watched the deepening relationship between Ace and Emily with a mix of pride and unease. He had always known Ace was a special dog, but there was something about the way the dog had reacted that day, rushing in to save Emily without a moment's hesitation, that unsettled him. Ace's past was something Michael had never fully shared with anyone. He knew that Ace had been more than just a companion in the K-9 unit. The dog had been a key player in major operations, involved in the capture of dangerous criminals and the neutralization of threats that no one else could handle. Michael had seen firsthand just how sharp and capable Ace was in the field. But he had always kept Ace's history under wraps, never wanting to relive the past. One night, as Michael sat in his living room, the doorbell rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone, But when he opened the door, he was surprised to see a familiar face standing on the other side. Jack Winters, his old colleague from the K-9 unit. "Jack," Michael said, stepping aside to let him in. "What are you doing here?" "Had to check in on you, Mike," Jack said, his tone serious. "Got some news, and I don't like it." Michael raised an eyebrow, suddenly wary. "What's going on?" Jack hesitated before speaking, his gaze shifting to the yard where Ace was playing with Emily. "You've got to be careful with Ace. There's a target on his back." Michael felt a chill run through him. "What are you talking about?" "It's not just a coincidence that Ace saved that little girl. The people we went after, the criminals we took down, they know about him. They're looking for him." Michael stiffened.
No.
"Not Ace. He's retired. He's done with all that." Jack shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Once you're in that world, it doesn't let you go. They don't forget. They never forget. They're searching for him, Michael. And if they find him, it won't just be you and me in danger. It'll be Emily, too." Michael's stomach dropped. The thought of anyone coming after Ace, or worse, Emily, was too much to bear. "But how do you know this?" Michael asked, his voice tight. "I've been hearing rumors," Jack said. "These people, they're not just ordinary criminals. They're organized, connected, and they've got people everywhere. They're starting to piece things together, and they know Ace is involved. They're going to come for him, and when they do, they won't stop until they get what they want." Michael felt a wave of anger rise within him. "I won't let them hurt anyone. Not Ace. Not Emily. Not anyone." Jack's eyes softened, but his expression was grim. "You might not have a choice. If they get close enough, you'll have to make a tough call." Michael looked out into the yard at Ace, who was now lying contentedly on the grass, his head resting on Emily's lap as she petted him. The peaceful scene stood in stark contrast to the storm brewing inside Michael. "You're sure of this?" Michael asked, his voice low. "I'm sure," Jack replied. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. You need to be ready. You can't just hide from them. They won't stop until they've got Ace. And when they do, they'll use him for things that you don't want to imagine." Michael exhaled sharply, his mind racing. Ace wasn't just a dog to him. He was a partner, a friend, a loyal protector. But now, that loyalty had put both Ace and Emily in danger. "What do I do?" Michael asked, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Jack looked him square in the eye. "You protect him. You keep him close, and you be ready. Whatever it takes." The next few days passed in a haze of dread. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something dark and dangerous. He kept a close watch on Ace, but more than that, he became hyper-aware of the growing sense of vulnerability in Emily's family. What had been a peaceful existence was now tainted by the looming threat of the past catching up with them. Emily, innocent and unaware of the danger surrounding her, continued to grow closer to Ace. She would sit with him for hours, drawing pictures or reading to him, as though the dog was her own personal guardian angel. Michael couldn't bear to tell her the truth. She was too young to understand the danger that Ace had been part of. One afternoon, as Michael and Ace took their usual walk through the park, he spotted a man in the distance. His eyes locked onto the figure, a man in a dark jacket who seemed to be watching them from afar. Michael's senses tingled. The man didn't belong there. "Stay close, Ace," Michael muttered, his hand tightening on the leash. His instincts were screaming at him to act, but he kept walking, trying to remain calm. He couldn't let the danger find them, not yet. As they neared the park's edge, the man suddenly turned and disappeared into the trees. Michael's heart raced. He wasn't sure if the man had recognized them or if he was just following a hunch, but the feeling in the pit of his stomach told him they were being watched. Back at home, Michael couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. He hadn't told Emily or her family about the potential danger. He couldn't bear to, not yet. But deep down, he knew that the peace they had all felt since Ace saved Emily's life was quickly coming to an end. He had to prepare for the worst, for Ace's past to catch up with him. Later that night, Michael sat in his living room, Ace at his feet, deep in thought. The decision was clear. He needed to protect Emily and her family, no matter the cost. The clock was ticking, and Michael knew that the danger was no longer just a distant threat. It was here. But the question remained, how far would he have to go to keep them safe? The following days were a blur of uneasy tension for Michael. Every creak of the floorboards, every unfamiliar car that passed his street, made his heart race. He couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was closing in. Michael hadn't wanted to tell Emily or her family yet about the threat, but with every passing moment, the situation felt more urgent. It was late one evening when Michael got the call that confirmed his worst fear. A local law enforcement contact of Jack's had sent him a tip. The criminal group, the ones Jack had warned him about, had been tracking Ace. They knew where Michael lived. They were getting closer. "Michael, you need to get out of there," Jack had warned, his voice tight with urgency. "They know about Ace. They'll do whatever it takes to get to him." Michael's pulse quickened. "I'm not running, Jack. I'm not leaving. They'll have to go through me first." He ended the call, but the weight of Jack's words hung heavily on his shoulders. Michael walked over to Ace, who was lying on the rug, watching him with calm, alert eyes. The dog had always been able to sense when something was wrong. His deep bond with Michael made them both more connected than ever. The thought of Emily and her family being caught in the crossfire made Michael's blood boil. He couldn't let them become targets because of Ace's past. He needed a plan. He needed to keep them all safe. The following morning, Michael made a decision. "Emily, come inside. It's time for breakfast," Sarah called from the kitchen. Her voice warm but tinged with a hint of exhaustion. She had been feeling the strain of the past few days, and it hadn't gone unnoticed by Emily. The little girl could sense that something was off, but like always, her focus was on her beloved dog. Michael had taken the opportunity to sit down with Sarah earlier that morning, explaining everything he could. The cryptic warning from Jack, the threat to Ace. It was a conversation Michael had dreaded, but the time had come to be honest, even if it broke Emily's sense of security. "Mom, can Ace come in with me?" Emily asked, her eyes wide as she held the dog's leash tightly. "Of course," Sarah smiled, though there was a small hesitation in her voice. She hadn't quite processed everything yet, but she trusted Michael. She trusted Ace. The family sat down to breakfast, but Michael noticed that Emily's gaze kept drifting toward the front window. She was looking out at the street, a faraway look in her eyes. It wasn't like her. Michael could feel the knot tightening in his stomach. "You okay, kiddo?" Michael asked gently, offering her a reassuring smile. Emily looked up and nodded, but her voice trembled slightly. "I feel like something's happening. Is everything okay, Michael?" Michael looked at Sarah, then at Ace. He knew he had to protect Emily's innocence for as long as possible, but the looming threat was too real to ignore. "Yeah, everything's fine," Michael said, though his voice lacked its usual warmth. "But we need to be extra careful just in case. Can you keep Ace close, Emily?" Emily looked down at Ace, her fingers playing with the leash. "I will. I won't let anything happen to him," she whispered, as if speaking to the dog. Michael stood up, his eyes scanning the windows. Every moment felt like an eternity. That afternoon, things took a turn for the worse. Michael had just finished his daily walk with Ace when he spotted a car that seemed to be circling his street. It wasn't the first time he had seen a suspicious vehicle, but this time, it was different. The car parked just down the street, out of sight, and its occupants, two men in dark clothing, watched the house. Michael's heart raced, but his instincts kicked in. He pulled Ace to the side, ducking down behind the bushes. They couldn't let these men see them. "Stay low, boy," Michael whispered, his voice barely audible. Ace responded with a soft growl, his hackles raised. The dog was alert, his body taut with anticipation. Michael's hand instinctively went to the pistol he carried for emergencies, but he didn't want to make a move unless absolutely necessary. He needed to get Emily and her family to safety first. Just as Michael was about to move toward the house, he heard a voice behind him, a sharp whisper. "Michael!" He turned to see Jack Winters standing at the edge of the yard, his face grim. "You've got to get them out of here now. It's too dangerous." "They're here." Michael's pulse spiked. "What do you mean, they're here?" "They've been watching you for days. It's not just a couple of guys. There's a whole team, and they won't leave until they get what they want. Michael's eyes flicked toward the house, his mind racing. He couldn't risk Emily and Sarah being caught in the crossfire. "How much time do we have?" Michael asked, his voice a mix of urgency and calm. "Minutes," Jack said, his voice tense. "We need to move. Now." They didn't have much time. Michael motioned to Jack, signaling him to follow as he quietly moved toward the front door. He had to act quickly. He didn't want to cause panic, but Sarah needed to know the danger they were facing. Michael knocked softly on the door, his hand steady despite the chaos in his mind. "Michael? What's going on?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with concern as she opened the door. "We need to go. Now," Michael said, his voice low but urgent. "Grab Emily and get to the car. We don't have time to explain everything." Sarah's face drained of color, but she didn't hesitate. "Emily, come on," she called, as she quickly ushered her daughter inside. Michael turned to Jack. "Help me keep an eye on the street. I'll make sure they're safe." As they hurried to the car, Michael's mind raced. He couldn't let anything happen to Emily or her family. The criminal group was close, too close. This had become a fight for survival, and Michael knew that he couldn't let Ace's past define the fate of the people he loved. But the closer they got to the car, the more Michael realized that this was just the beginning. They were no longer just running from danger. They were running toward a battle that neither of them could fully understand. The sound of tires screeching against the pavement echoed in Michael's mind as he watched Sarah and Emily scramble into the car. The situation had escalated faster than he had imagined, and his heart pounded with the rush of adrenaline. Every instinct told him to keep them safe, to protect them at all costs. His hands tightened around the wheel as he drove, eyes scanning the rearview mirror for any sign of pursuit. "Stay low," Michael instructed, his voice steady despite the panic coursing through him. "If we lose them in the next few blocks, we'll have a chance to get to the safe house." Ace, sitting in the back with Emily, looked up at Michael, his dark eyes sharp and alert. The dog seemed to sense the tension, his ears twitching as he watched the road ahead. Emily, her small face filled with concern, reached out to pet Ace, trying to calm herself. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, her voice small. Michael turned to glance at her in the rearview mirror. "We're going to a safe place, Emily. Don't worry, Ace is going to keep you safe, just like he did before." Emily nodded, but Michael could see the worry in her eyes. She had seen too much in such a short time, and though she trusted him and Ace, she couldn't help but be afraid. The drive felt endless, and every minute stretched into what seemed like hours. Michael's thoughts raced. He had tried to prepare for this moment, but nothing could have fully prepared him for the danger that was closing in. He had kept one eye on the road, but his mind kept returning to the two men he had seen earlier, those who were hunting Ace. He didn't know who they were working for, but he knew that once they found him, there would be no stopping them. The sound of a phone buzzing in his pocket startled him, and he quickly pulled over to the side of the road. It was Jack's number. "Michael," Jack's voice came through the phone, urgent and breathless. "They're closing in. You're not safe. They know where you're headed." "Damn it," Michael muttered under his breath. "I can't keep running. I'm not leaving them." "I get it," Jack said. "But listen to me. There's a warehouse a few miles down the road. It's abandoned, but it's secure. I've arranged for backup to meet you there." Michael's pulse quickened. "You sure this place is safe?" "Safe enough," Jack replied. "But you need to get there now. They won't stop looking for you." "All right," Michael said, his voice tight. "We're on our way." He hung up the phone and glanced at Sarah, who had been silently watching him. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was a sense of determination in them too. She trusted Michael, and that trust meant everything right now. "We're heading to a warehouse just up ahead," Michael said quickly. "It's a safe place for now. We just have to stay alert." As they neared the warehouse, Michael's grip tightened on the wheel. He could feel the weight of what was about to happen. There was no more running. The criminals were coming for them, and he had to face them head-on. They had to be ready for a fight. The warehouse loomed ahead, an old, weathered building tucked away in a quiet industrial part of town. The only sounds were the faint hum of the wind and the distant rattle of trucks passing by. Michael pulled into the empty lot behind the building, his heart racing as he scanned the area. It was dark, the only light coming from a flickering street lamp in the corner. He parked the car and turned to Sarah and Emily. "Stay here," he ordered firmly, though his voice softened when he spoke to Emily. "We'll be right back." Emily nodded, her small hands gripping the edge of the seat. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice full of concern. "We will," Michael said, then gave her a reassuring smile. He turned to Ace, who was already alert, his body poised and ready for action. "Stay close, boy," Michael murmured, as he stepped out of the car. As Michael and Ace approached the warehouse, he felt the weight of the moment. Every step felt heavy, as if they were walking into a storm they couldn't control. Jack's backup wasn't far behind, but Michael knew that the outcome of this confrontation would hinge on their ability to outsmart the criminals who were closing in on them. They reached the warehouse door, and Michael took a deep breath. It was time. With one hand on his gun and the other clutching the collar of Ace's leash, he pushed open the door. The dimly lit interior of the warehouse smelled of old wood and dust. There was an eerie silence, the kind that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Michael motioned for Ace to stay close, and the dog, ever vigilant, followed closely behind. Suddenly, from the shadows, two figures emerged, tall, dark, and menacing. The men stepped forward, their faces partially obscured by masks, but Michael could see the cold glint of danger in their eyes. "You've got nowhere to run, Michael," one of the men said, his voice low and threatening. "Give us Ace, and we'll leave you and your little family out of it." Michael didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. "Not going to happen," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You've got no idea who you're messing with." The man chuckled darkly. "We know exactly who you are, and we know what Ace can do. He's been a thorn in our side for too long. Now he's ours." Before Michael could react, Ace lunged forward, his teeth bared, but Michael stopped him with a quick command. "Stay." Ace hesitated but obeyed, his body tense and alert. Michael's eyes darted between the two men, then to the shadows where he sensed more figures lurking. The situation was escalating. They were outnumbered, but Michael wasn't going down without a fight. "We don't want to hurt you," Michael said calmly, his voice carrying an edge of authority. "But if you think you can take Ace from me, you're wrong." Just as the men started to advance, a loud crash echoed from the entrance of the warehouse. Jack and his backup burst in, guns drawn, ready to protect Michael and Ace. The criminals hesitated for a split second, but it was all the opening Michael needed. "Now!" Michael shouted. A flurry of movement ensued. Gunshots rang out, and in the chaos, Michael and Ace moved with precision. The men, realizing they were cornered, made a desperate attempt to flee, but Ace was already on them, his sharp instincts guiding him as he took down one of the men. The confrontation ended swiftly. The criminals were subdued, their plans thwarted. Jack's backup moved in, securing the area and ensuring no one else was waiting in the wings. As Michael stood, breathing heavily from the adrenaline, he glanced down at Ace, who was panting beside him. The dog had done it again, protecting him, protecting Emily, and protecting their new life. The aftermath of the confrontation left Michael exhausted, but a deep sense of relief washed over him. Ace had once again proven himself to be more than just a dog. He was a true hero. As they made their way back to the car, Michael looked at Emily, who was waiting anxiously in the back seat. Her face lit up when she saw Ace, and she rushed to him, hugging him tightly. "You're my hero," she whispered, her voice full of love. Michael smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Yeah, he is," he said quietly, knowing that no matter what came next, Ace had already made all the difference in their lives. The danger was over for now, but Michael knew that he and Ace would always be ready for whatever came next, because together, they were unstoppable. This story reveals the remarkable bond between a retired police officer, his heroic K9, and a young girl they saved together. It explores the themes of loyalty, courage, and the unexpected heroism that can come from the most unlikely of places. The plot highlights how true heroes are not born in grand gestures, but in the quiet, courageous actions they take when it matters most. Through this journey, we also see how even the darkest moments can lead to healing and growth. At its core, this story conveys that heroism often comes in many forms and is found in the quietest acts of selflessness. Loyalty and trust are at the heart of the strongest relationships, whether between humans or between a human and an animal. It reminds us that no matter the size or the scale, every act of courage matters and can change lives forever. We invite you to share your thoughts, feelings, and reactions to this heartwarming tale. Like the video, comment below, and share it with your friends so they too can experience the journey of Ace and Emily. Your interactions inspire us to create more meaningful stories, and every like, comment, and share is a tremendous motivation for us to keep bringing you content that moves and entertains. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another inspiring story like this. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this story. Your support means everything to us, and we are so grateful for the amazing community we're building together. We look forward to bringing you more touching and thrilling stories in the future. Stay tuned, and thank you for being a part of our journey.